Welcome to the First Mentor Podcast. Here, you will hear us talk about a variety of topics for the entire family that will hopefully spark a discussion, create a new curiosity, or simply teach you something new. The goal is to inspire you to learn life skills and soft skills not taught in school and prepare you to live an extraordinary life. Come on and spend some time with us on your commute to school or anytime you're free.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Vanessa Yang, and thank you for joining us for episode 13 now of the First Mentor Podcast. And today you're in for a real treat since I have my good friend, Drew Hayashida, join me. And just a little bit about Drew's background. He was born and raised in California as a fourth generation Japanese American, and he moved to Los Angeles as a young adult. And while he was in LA, he worked for the Walt Disney Company for over 20 years, initially at Disneyland, and then eventually he transferred to corporate. And he was working in a variety of roles, including training and development. And Drew is known for his passion in pop culture, his deep knowledge about all things Disney, Star Wars, and probably Marvel as well. And sometimes during his over 20 years experience with the Walt Disney Company is probably where we met. And I really enjoy catching up with him. And I thought it would be really helpful to share with you, our audience, and give you some advice. For example, when you start a new job, or especially as an intern or entry-level position, on how to succeed at a corporate environment. At the end, make sure you don't forget to subscribe or add us to your favorite list. And let's dive right in. Drew and I don't even know how many years we go back. We met while we were both working at the Walt Disney Company. I started in 2005, which was a long time ago, and left in 2016. When did you start again?
I started, and hello, everybody, by the way. My name is Drew.
Yeah.
I started with Disney, gives away my age, way back in, I started Disneyland in 1988, but I consider that part of my whole service for the Walt Disney Company.
Mm-hmm.
So I continuously was there from 88 to 2014.
Wow. Yeah. Quite a long time too. And the reason I wanted to bring Drew on board is, it's funny. I see Drew as so many different personalities. He wears so many different hats. And I met him through probably some of the Disney learning experience when he was within or part of the HR, the Human Resources Department in learning and development. He did orientation, tours. I believe, you know what, now that I think about it, I did meet you through Disney Way One because you gave us probably the special tour on the Walt Disney Studio lot with the behind the scenes. I remember some of the information. That was awesome. And you're like my go-to guy, everything Disney. You just have so much knowledge. But we're not here specifically to talk about your Disney knowledge, but more about tips and tricks or how to work and start a career at the corporate level, whether you start as an intern or you're just freshly graduated and you're starting your first job. Because at the corporate environment, what I've learned, I spent 15, 20 years in a corporate environment with different companies. A lot of the culture, there's so many unwritten rules, I would say. And it would be always really helpful to have a better understanding. What are those unwritten rules? What are the company's cultures? They say certain things. You probably go through orientation and they share some information with you, but there's so much more that is not said. And I thought Drew would be a great person to share that from an HR perspective, while I can share some of my experience more from I guess I was in corporate, but not in the HR. I was in accounting and financial reporting. So from a leader perspective there, what I have seen. And maybe we could just jump right into it, Drew. I feel like I wanted to share, like, when you work, share a little bit about when you worked, like you did orientation for several years, right? When people literally start their first day, what have you observed with people? Were they nervous when they started, especially people who have never worked before? I don't know if you encountered interns and those really brand new.
And I actually started doing orientations at Disneyland for their hourly cast members.
Great.
I did that from 2001 till about 2004. And it's different because when you go to the corporate atmosphere, the culture is very, very different. So when I transferred in 2004 to the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank to do their corporate orientation, there was a learning curve because their expectations are different. What they need to know is different. So I could tell you both sides of that, from the
Sure.
hourly and understand Disneyland's cast members. The average age is between 18 to 24 about. It's, because it's kind of like that kind of job. So they're younger. They tend to be much more immersed in the Disney thing. So they're
The
really
pixie dust.
yeah,
That's what I called it.
yeah, they're way more into all that. So their orientation really just tried to validate that. Is like, hey, you're right, there is pixie dust here. Yes, it is a job and it is going to be hard, but at the same time, this is all part of the magic that we bring to people, kind of stuff. So magic was kind of a big word, and using the terminologies like cast members and stuff, that was all
That's right.
that was all key to that. And you got to meet Mickey Mouse at the end of your orientation. Sorry if you're just going to start Disneyland, spoiler alert, you're going to meet Mickey Mouse at the end of your orientation. But so that was a very different kind of thing. It's funny, they're more eager, but at the same time, it was a 7-hour day, and about halfway through, they pooped out. They just mentally, emotionally were just drained. And part of it is attention span, but part of it is just, you're sitting in an auditorium a good portion of that time. It's
For the
tough.
orientation, you mean itself?
At Disneyland. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a long one.
Yeah, it's really, really long. There is a tour involved and all this and that, but it can be tough. So for younger people, and they're incorporating more interactivity, understanding that their audience is a little different and their expectations are a little different. So there's a bit of that, but it's harder. When I transferred to Burbank, the culture is, first of all, the orientation can't be long in general because people need to, they want to jump into their jobs and they have paperwork that they have to finish filling with HR, all this stuff. So that was between 5 and 6 hours, a lot shorter. And that one, you really are in a room pretty much the entire time. We have like an hour of a tour and lunch, but outside of that hour and a half or whatever it is, it's all inside a room. So everything is about the facilitator, and I was a facilitator.
Okay.
So I had to adjust what I talked about and how I talked about it. At Disneyland, it's energy, and I'm so excited to have you here too, and this is a great gig, and you're awesome, and we need you. At corporate, it's much more like, this is what the business is. This is, we're doing this orientation program so that you have a better understanding of the company as a whole.
So more factual.
It's a lot more factual. There is still bits of pixie dust in there, but it's way more tactical, practical stuff.
Sure.
This is our intranet, and this is how you look things up on our page and all that kind of stuff internally. And then again, you meet up with HR at the end to finish up your paperwork and all that stuff. So it's, especially in the business world, in the corporate world, I was almost hired at another company to do their orientation after I left Disney the first time. And I'm glad I didn't end up doing that, because the company I ended up working for, NBC Universal, where I did their orientation for almost a year, it was great. But one of the problems with orientation is it's not just telling you the organization, and it's not just, telling you. Most of that stuff you can look up online, and people who are savvy will look up the company they're going to work for first.
Absolutely.
So
Very important.
To me, orientation, what you really, really need is you need to understand what the culture is, because you can't get that off the internet.
Sure.
What are you going to get out of this? Yes, I want to make it, exciting and all this stuff. Look at how big the company is and all the things we do. But it's also like, what does that mean to you as the employee? How do you have to behave? What is the expectation of you within the company?
So you share that during orientation?
Yeah, and you
Okay.
can't do that if you've just starting with a company. You can't. Yeah, you can kind of intellectually design an orientation, stuff like that, but unless you understand the culture of a company, you're not really giving the new hire anything new. Um,
True. I see what
except
you.
for, again, tactical practical. So that's kind of my job as well, is to do all that stuff. So I needed to have a great, because I was with corporate, we did orientations for every division within the company worldwide. So we had people from Asia and Europe as well in that orientation, and it was every level, all the way up to executives. So I needed to be able to communicate to every level, to speak to just about every department, um, and every part of the company, from a high level point of view. But I had a basic understanding of the entire company, which actually made me excited about the company, was learning more things.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
and obviously from an HR perspective, that's also good to know, so that you understand roles and positions. So if you're in this position at internet, it's different than that same title in a creative department like film or television.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I needed to have a general understanding of all of that stuff up at corporate. So that was the fun part for me. And I did get to meet so many, because I would do intern
You met
orientations
so
too.
many people.
So I did a lot of meet and greets with interns and stuff like that. I had so many conversations with young people who just were blindsided by what you learn in college versus what their experience was.
Yes.
And that's a huge challenge. I mean, for your listeners, for sure, if you're entering a new company, it doesn't matter if it's a big company like Disney or a smaller company, but really honestly, yes, absolutely take everything that you're learning in school, sure, but understand when you go into a new business that it may not be what your professors are telling you, because they're not out there anymore. Maybe they used to work at IBM 20 years ago, but they don't anymore.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and and as you guys all know, the corporate environment is very fluid. It's constantly changing, especially entertainment, constantly changing. So you have to be prepared for any number of things. So that was one of the things I used to talk to interns about a lot, because they were just like, my professor told me this, this, and this. I had mentors in school who told me this, this, and this, and none of that was true.
And I wanted to go back a step to what you mentioned, a meet and greet. I used to do this a lot, but in on your own words, can you explain quickly what a meet and greet is?
Yeah. So one of the things, and one of the things that I've been complimented for is the ability to network. I cannot emphasize, it does not matter what business you're in, whether it's like accounting and economics to legal to creative. Networking is key in any
Yes.
business, because we are people, human beings. We have a need to connect. That's why during this COVID thing, we have Zooms and all this stuff. We need to connect. So your ability, my ability, anyone's ability to succeed within any business is the ability to be able to interact with others, based upon the business as well and that business culture.
Hmm.
Meet and greets. It was easy for interns and actually any employee to reach out to me, because I was their day one person. And of course, I gave them my contact information. So for me, it was a little bit easier from a new hire perspective to talk to me about the ins and outs of the company, at least from a high level standpoint. But especially if you have a good leader, a good boss, they will encourage you to do that too. It's please, go to these functions and go to these meetings and stuff like that. Interact with other people. The
Hmm.
ability to meet other people is priceless. And what you learn from those relationships, and some of those relationships will carry you on. Like my mentor at the Walt Disney Studios, she was the best mentor maybe I've ever had, and we ended up becoming friends years after that, after she retired. And some of these relationships may not lead into personal relationships. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm
Sure.
saying is, if you have a great mentor, you do have a bond and a connection, and a trust. And that's another thing, is trust is really hard. So meet and greets, I think, are key in all of those things.
Yes. Did you meet individually with a person, or was this more a group setting?
I was asked a couple of times from mutual friends to do Like my friend, one of my friend, he's on the board of UCLA. So he asked if I would talk to some of, the young people at that college about my experience at Disney. So there was sometimes that kind of thing would happen for me,
Hmm.
but mostly it was one-on-one. I would just have somebody randomly, contact me, email me and say, "Hey, I went to your orientation. You gave me your contact information and I'd like to know more about blah, 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 blah."
Yes,
And
exactly. Yeah, I did that too.
well, and then I'm going to throw it back to you, but what I was going to say is another tip I would say is when you're contacting somebody, either whether it's in person or via email. A lot of people say email them first as an introduction. Don't make that email your life story. I got quite a few emails
Too much
that,
information.
yeah, it was just 3 paragraphs, and it was the intent was good, but I tell you, a lot of leaders, they don't have the time to read all that stuff. What they want to know is, yeah, definitely tell them who you are, but they want to know, what do you want from me? you know
Yes. Why are you contacting me?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, okay, well, I just started with a company. I'm an intern. I got your contact information from blah blah blah. I'm very interested in, your work and your division, and let me know if you, and never make it an hour lunch or anything. Like, always start off by saying, "Hey,
Agree.
if you even have 15 minutes just to chat on the phone, that'd be great. Or we can grab a cup of coffee for 20 minutes, something like that. And then let them dictate how long the meeting is going to go." But
Yes.
what has your experience been like when people have reached out to you for meet and greets?
You touched upon very good points. And I wanted to re-emphasize a few things. I totally agree with reaching out via an email first and to keep it short. And I think what would be even better is if you have your leader, your manager introduce you. So if you could talk to your manager and say, "Oh, I heard about this and this person. I would love to meet with her and him and learn about this a little bit more. And I notice you know this person. Would you mind making an introduction?" Because the chances of getting a response is so much higher if your leader reaches out on your behalf versus when you reach out yourself. Because to your point earlier, they just get hundreds of emails each day. They don't have time to run from meetings to meetings. And the last thing they would, I mean, they do it, of course, but sometimes it just skips them to response to emails from a name that they don't recognize. So my tip is, if possible, have somebody introduce you, but if not, do it yourself and keep it short. This is my name. I'm new here. This is why I'm contacting you. I would love to learn more. Don't suggest lunch. I used to make that mistake when I was new in the beginning. I was like, "Oh, I would love to meet you." I was very excited. And the other tip I would have is also follow up. Don't be afraid to follow up. When I was younger in my career and I was like afraid, it took me a long time just to hit the send button. And when I sent it, I heard nothing but I'm like, "Oh, this person doesn't want to talk to me." I just automatically assumed. But I learned as I got more experience, it just happens they skip the email. So a quick follow up, and then you get a response. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot about it." So don't be afraid. But then also balance it. Don't pester people and just follow up within a few hours. Give them a day or two to respond, and if not, maybe 3 4 days later or a week later, just very gentle reminder. But I think also, if you can, let's say timing is very important when you reach out. So when I did accounting, we had our ebbs and flows, like time, what we call a crunch time or quarter close time, which was really busy. The last thing I have time for is to respond to an email. So if you reach me exactly during those times, I will not respond, most likely. So if you work in the same team, you should know the timing. So pick a time when it's slower. I think that would be great, just from a timing
I
perspective.
never thought about that, but that's absolutely true. 'Cause I never had to really deal with that,
Yeah,
in terms of time, except for year end. Year end is always bad for everybody, so
true.
that's like never a good time to try to contact anybody. But yeah, the other, you made me think of something, and all that stuff is absolutely right. And the other thing, you made me think of is the subject line. I always would get
Yes,
every once
that's a
in a
good one.
it would just say hello, and I'm like, I, you know, hello
Hello.
what? So usually, I mean, introduction, if it just says introduction, that's okay to me. Or meet and greet in the subject line. I mean, let the person know what this email is about, Even if you've been introduced already, don't put it in hello or greetings, because that's so.
Yes. It says nothing.
I don't like people try. Yeah, I don't like people try to fish. You're just fishing for me to kind of do stuff, and
Mhm.
and it's
Make
it
it
feels.
easier for them.
Yeah, and it feels manipulative too. It's like that. It's very passive aggressive. So people, especially professionals and especially leaders, again, they just don't have time to kind of, fuss around. Let me know what you want. And generally speaking, if you're fairly direct, you want to be polite and all that stuff. But directness is usually the best approach in general. And I totally agree with you. If you have an advocate, best
Mhm.
thing ever.
Yes,
Best thing ever.
that helped me to get to some high level SVPs and senior executives because of the introduction. Because otherwise, they would have ignored me. Or sometimes I would ask my bosses, "Can I use your name?" So I would put in the subject line, "Introduced by so and so." So then they're like, "Oh, I know this person." Then they're more likely to open the email. So that's actually a really good point you brought, Drew, is the subject line. Some of the things what you touch upon, and I wanted to go into this a little bit, is conversation and communication, right? It's extremely, extremely important, and know who your target audience is. So whether you talk to another fellow intern or reach out through a senior executive, you talk very differently.
Absolutely. I would think in general, it is a strategy,
Mm-hmm.
a strategy that I use kind of in general in life, but it definitely serves me when I'm doing meet and greets and stuff like that. If I'm trying to learn more from somebody else, is just have a lot of questions for them. As much as you want to share and sell yourself a little bit, and a lot of people want to do that, and that's fine, but really the meet and greet should be about them. What can you
Yes.
learn from that person? And I'll tell you, just from a human being standpoint, this is when your meeting goes from 15 minutes to 45, is you get them to talk, and when they're comfortable, they'll go on as long as they want to go, and you
Mm-hmm.
just let them go, even if they start trailing off on things that you may not be as uh or may not be as pertinent to what you're hoping to get out of the experience. Anything that they say is useful information. And also, you're creating a relationship. If the conversation goes really, really well, they're more apt to like talk to you later. Maybe oh, I'm out of time, I got to go, but I'd love to continue this conversation, kind of
Yes.
thing. Or they'll remember you and go, you know what, this was great, even though you may not have said too much. If they felt good, they're going to like,
Yes.
this was a great conversation, I can't wait to talk to you again. And you know what, I'll think about you if there's something else that opens up. And it doesn't always, to be honest. Oh, that's another great thing, don't set expectations. Meet and greets are learning, creating relationships. And even if it ends up that professional relationship may not lead to a job immediately,
Mm-hmm.
having that contact could lead to other stuff.
Yes.
um I'll tell you, when I first went to corporate from Disneyland. So again, I was at Disneyland for over 10 years, and um I ended up working with somebody I met when I first started at Disneyland in 1988, and I hadn't seen him in that long time, 14 years, and I ended up working with them. So these kinds of relationships and all these things are very, very important. Everything they tell you about not burning bridges is absolutely true. You
100% agree.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to meet that person again. You never know who that person knows. Um, so even the truth of the matter is, in any work environment, you're not going to get along with everybody. It's just human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. All you have to do is to be able to do your job the best you can. You can create a good reputation, I think. The better off you'll be, and that kind of stuff spreads always. People, oh my gosh, this person was great, and all that stuff. Even people you don't like, if they don't really have, you know, bad things to say about you, then that's good. And again, you never know if you're going to work with that person again someday. So
Yes.
absolutely, with your friends who don't work there, vent.
Be careful who you vent to. Actually, that's a very good point, though. And you,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah, you please.
and you make some really, really good points. It's the building relationship part. I think when I had mentees throughout my career, my number one advice for them is really networking. And the whole reason is even from my own experience, a lot of my promotions along the way came not from what I knew and how good I was at my job. I mean, I hope I was decent enough to get the promotion, not just, but really from who I knew. It was the relationship that pulled me to the next level. When I first made senior financial analyst, when I made manager, when I became a department leader, it was all about knowing the person because I worked with them before at one point, or I met them on a business trip, or whatever the reason might be. And really keeping in touch is important, not just reach out to them one time and then they never hear from you again. And I wanted to continue on the networking, the relationship building beyond meet and greet. So that's the first step, right? But really simple things like use a holiday. I know Drew is really good with holidays and sending happy so and so, whatever the holiday might be. I've noticed that with you. You're great with that. But at work, I did, for example, during the Christmas holidays, it's always a good reason just to walk around, maybe drop off some cookies or just send them a card. Handwritten is something that most people don't do anymore. And
Right.
that's become a lot more special if you actually take a few minutes just to handwrite a note. And I think it goes both ways. When senior executives, I only had one who's done a handwritten note and like the whole department appreciated that. And also the other way around, when you write one to your coworkers and what have you, they remember it's not just an email that you typed up and send it to 100 people that you blind copied on the email, right? It's really more on a one-on-one basis, and you make them feel special.
Yeah, you know what? That's true, and I can say that for myself. That whenever I receive a handwritten note of any kind, it means these days it means so much more. I mean, I have no problems with mass emails and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're keeping in touch, which is what it is. But if you really want to make an impression, yeah, if you can handwrite a note or do something a little bit more personal, it doesn't have to be garish or anything too extreme,
Mm-hmm.
but people remember that. They really, really do. You're absolutely right.
Yes. And actually, even handwritten thank you notes after an interview made such a huge impression. I remember when you interview, just to share a little bit behind the scene, when you go interview, especially at Disney, you don't just meet one person, you meet multiple people,
Yeah.
right? It's like almost an American Idol panel, but hopefully one-on-one, not all at once. And we get together afterwards and we talk about this person. What do you think about this person? And there were a few times we made comments about how they followed up with us. There was a person once, he was referred to us from another team for the manager position we had open on our team. And he just came over so cocky as if the role was guaranteed for him. So he just mass emailed 3 to 4 of us all together. And it was not very professional written, but at least he said thank you in the email. But it was not very targeted. It was
Mm,
not very sincere. It was from a perspective of this is my job, but I just have to send you a thank you email. So we
right.
talked about that. We all remembered. But on the flip side, if there was somebody who sent a thank you email individually first and followed up with a handwritten thank you note that came through snail mail, we were like, oh, look how sweet this person took the extra time. So we remember from our perspective when we interviewed. And just know we talk.
Mm.
People talk about you all the time.
It's true. And I remember when I worked at NBC Universal, like I said, for about 9 months. And when I was going through the initial interview process with the HR person, she was asking me a lot of questions about Disney, because that was my previous
Of
employer.
course.
And I was honest about all my answers, but I'm like, wow, some of these questions are super like, pointed, like very specific. And she goes, oh yeah, well, I talked to one of the training or one of the HR people, recruiters over at Disney, because we're all friends. And I'm like, wow, okay. See, so, your reputation is huge. Like you have no idea who talks about what and how that reaches over. HR recruiters, they constantly talk to each other because they never know if, do you know somebody who'd be great for this role? That happens
Yes.
a lot.
Yes.
So once again, networking and having a good reputation, all these things are good. So those thank you notes and follow-ups are very, very key in creating that relationship and having a positive impression. Yeah.
Yes, we talked too, even though after I worked at Disney, a lot of my friends went to the neighboring entertainment studios, right? Warner Brothers, NBC Universal, what have you. And when they look at the resume and they see a specific department, they're like, oh, Vanessa
Mhm.
worked at it. Let me call her and see if she knows that person. And even though the person didn't happen to work on my team, but I might have an impression, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. Even I've learned one thing which was very interesting from one of my former bosses. Even if a person has been with you on the same team for a while, but they have no opinion of you, that actually says something too.
Yeah.
And I
Sure.
never noticed that. I just realized, oh, okay, I'm close with this person, but have not really spent much time with that person over there. And as a result, we didn't know each other. But my boss was like, well, isn't that saying something to you too, that he doesn't know what to say about you? And it never occurred to me to think about that before. I'm like, oh, actually, that's a good point. Neutral means something too.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. That's almost one of the worst things you can be is neutral. It's almost like you'd rather they didn't like you very much because at least that's something that's an
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
But
But just be careful what Drew and I are saying is like your reputation proceeds within companies. So it's not just staying within the same company, but it travels. Word travels fast.
and I would say, especially in entertainment, but probably in technology fields too, it's very incestuous. People, you could talk to almost anybody in either industry and have they worked at several different companies of that same industry. Yeah. I worked at Microsoft and then I worked over at, Yahoo for a while. I mean, they all kind of, revolve around those companies. And entertainment is definitely that way. I can't even tell you how many people I know worked at Warner's and NBC
Mhm.
Universal and
Yes.
Disney. Yeah, you have to be conscious of that to some degree. I mean, you shouldn't be worried about it. You can't like lose sleep over it. But just it goes right back down to the core of what we're talking about is creating a positive impression and a good reputation with as many people as you encounter as you can.
Didn't Drew share some amazing information so far? So, in the past 20, 30 minutes, you learned about company culture, what a meet and greet is, networking in general, and building relationships. We actually covered a lot more topics during our interview, but I decided to share the remaining tips and tricks on how to succeed in a corporate environment in part 2 of this podcast. So make sure you listen to episode 15 to learn more about the first few months on the job, the benefits of having a mentor, corporate politics, and others. Don't miss it since it would really give you an edge, especially when you start your career. I hope you gained some useful information today. Again, thank you so much for listening to us and spending some time with us during this podcast. Make sure you subscribe or save us to your favorite list. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.